in one afternoon. I've reviewed thousands of business models. The pattern is always the same. They're strong in 2 or 3 areas and fatally weak in the ones nobody's looking at. Over the next 12 minutes, I'll show you all 7 and the stress testing system that helps founders catch fatal flaws before wasting months of time and money. So let me show you what this looks like in practice. When I started my latest product, Lean Spark, last year, I mapped out my business model on a single page using a lean canvas. The original idea was a comprehensive AI course for startup founders, video lessons, interactive modules, the works. And this is what I put on my canvas. For customer segment, early stage founders. The problem was that founders struggle to apply lean methodology. And my solution, an AI-powered course that teaches frameworks. It looked complete, made sense on paper, and I was ready to start building. But then I talked to a few founders, and one of them told me, I don't need another course, I need help executing what I've already learned. Another one said, I've taken 3 courses already, but I still haven't got traction. And this one nailed it. My problem isn't learning, it's applying it consistently. Do you see the gap? I had the problem roughly right. Founders do struggle to apply lean methodology, but my solution was not quite correct. They didn't need more teaching, they needed something that would help them do the work. I would have spent months building yet another course nobody wanted at the end of the day. And the scary part was that nothing on my canvas looked broken from the outset. Every box was filled, it all made sense on paper. The problem wasn't that anything was really missing, the problem was that I had no way to tell if it was right or not. Now maybe you're in the same spot. Whether you use a lean canvas, a pitch deck, or just a doc on your laptop, you've got a business model, maybe you've revised it a few times. But how do you actually know if your customer segment is specific enough? Your value proposition really differentiate, revenue model is going to work. Most founders don't know this until they're already built one thing. I went back to make sense stress spurningly. And here's what most people about stressing. They confuse testing with validation, and here's the difference. Think about how architects work. Before they pour a single foundation, they build a blueprint. Then they run simulations. Wind loads, earthquake resistance, structural integrity. They stress test the design on paper because it's 1,000 times cheaper to find a crack in a simulation than it is to find in an actual building. That's exactly what we're doing here. Your lean canvas is the blueprint, validation is the construction, going out, talking to customers, building the product, all that takes months and expensive. Stressing is the simulation. You can do that and it tells you your model is even worth building in this. You don't want to pour information on a flawed design. And there are 7 dimensions that need to hold up when you put on them. Let me walk you 1. Number 1 is clarity. Can you explain your business model on a page? No contradictions and no critical gaps. When you say enterprise customers, but your price is $20 a month, that's a contradiction. When you're unfit story, that's a gap. And they write a simple and complete. No one else is going to understand what you. Number 2 stress test is desirability. Is the problem big enough to make people want to switch? Every innovation is about causing a switch from an old to your way. I call this the innovator's gift. Don't ask, do people want my solution? Instead, ask what's broken about the existing alternative that they're currently using. And is it broken enough to change their behavior? If you can't answer that simply, your desirability story will be weak. And it won't matter how. In this case, forget 5-year financial projections. You can answer this question in 5 minutes using just 3 numbers: your goal, your price, and your market size. One founder told me he needed $10 million in revenue. He was charging $50 a month. That would have required 17,000 paying customers. The problem is that his target market was capped at 10,000 companies. The math just didn't work, and it took 5 minutes for him to see that. Now, it's much better in this case to kill a flawed business model in 5 minutes than spending 5 months chasing one that was never going to work. Number 4 on the stress test list is feasibility. This isn't can you build it, rather it's can you get this to meaningful traction before running out of resources. In this case, forget your product roadmap. Instead, think in terms of outcome milestones. If you need, say, 1,000 customers in year 3 and assume a 10x growth rate, you will need 100 in year 2 and 10 customers in year 1. So how do you get started? What do you do over the next 90 days to build a pipeline to hit these goals? That's what feasibility stress testing is really about. The biggest risk here is usually not technical risk, but rather customer and channel risk. What most founders tend to gloss over at the early stages. Number 5, mission. Is this idea right for you? Not is this a good idea, is this good idea for you specifically? That's the real question to be asking. I call this stress test the founder model fit stress test. Not all ideas that work can be worked by all founders. Number 6 on the list is timing. This answers the why now question. In order to get timing right, you need 3 things to come together: an inflection, which is some external event that changes the game; a measurable impact, which talks about real stakes, not high, and a control insight that most people haven't yet. Simply saying AI isn't a good timing argument. Instead, starting with AI just made it possible to deliver expert coaching at 1% of the cost is a much better place to start. Number 7, and finally, we think about feasibility Anything worth copying will be copied. What's the unfair advantage story? Now, in the cases of unfair advantage, don't need a but you need a clear path to things like network effects, proprietary data, switching costs, something that's wrong over time. Feels executor, it's not a story, that's simply a wishful thinking prayer. Now, here's what matters. Most founders do well with 2 or 3 of these stress tests right out of the gate, but you pass all steps because a business only strong as its weakest dimension. So how do you actually get stress testing all 7? Well, do it yourself. You could grab my Lean book or get some other course like the business model design course and work through each dimension and score yourself honestly. The good news is that once you learn these stress tests, run them only takes a few minutes, but the process is iterative. You refine this from plan A to a plan that passes, and doing that can take several days, even weeks. In fact, the average time undertakes to complete my business model design course is roughly 14 days. The big problem here is that it's really hard to be objective about your own idea. We all convince ourselves our model is stronger than it actually is. Sure, you could hire a coach or an advisor, someone who has done this 100 times, who can spot the gaps you're blind to. That of course works, but it costs $200 to $500 an hour, and you need multiple sessions to cover all 7 dimensions. So you're looking at roughly $1,000 to $2,000 founders. That led me to pivot the original idea for LeanSpark from a course into a startup co-founder that, among other things, helps you stress test your idea. If you want to try it right now, the link's in the description below. It's free to get started, but let me show you what the process actually looks like. So you start by importing your business model. You can build it from scratch with our conversation Canvas builder. If you already have a landing page, you can just import that from the URL. In my example here, I'm going to use our current LeanSpark landing page to get my canvas into the system. Let me paste the URL and hit import. What LeanSpark does next is it scrapes the content and auto-populates the Lean canvas, which takes about 45 seconds to a minute to get done. And there it is. Customer segments, the problem, solution, all filled in. And here's where it gets interesting. I'm going to run the 7-dimension stress test to baseline my idea. Now, it's the same framework I just walked you through just now, but instead of taking 3 to 4 hours to run each test one at a time, LeanSpark runs all 7 in parallel and does it in under a minute. What you're seeing here is all the scores coming in. And from this report, you can see that I have 2 failures here. Let's dig into that next. Timing and defensibility. Let's click into defensibility and see why that failed. Now you'll see from this report, it's broken into 3 sections. There's a key insight section, recommendations, and finally, concrete next steps. Now I could internalize each recommendation, update my canvas, and rerun the test, but there's an even easier way. I can have LeanSpark help me do that by simply clicking the fix button here. What it's I'm going to do is it's going to explain what's missing in my business model and prompt me with a set of questions that I can then answer to strengthen my canvas. So in my case, I'm just going to paste my responses here and have it run the assessment again. I'm going to go through this a few times until I get my business model passing. I then repeat the same for timing, and after a few chat messages back and forth with LeanSpark, I now have a stress tested idea that passes all 7 dimensions. The whole process here took me a few minutes. Granted, I did start with a more refined canvas in this case, but even with a brand new idea, you should be able to get through the process in a few hours versus the days it normally takes. Now, one more thing. Let's say I want to share this canvas with my co-founder or an advisor, but the canvas is quite detailed, as you can see here. I can simply click Simplify Canvas, and LeanSpark will boil it down to a single page. There it is. It's ready to export as a PDF or a slide you can use in your pitch deck. Now, this is what I wish I had when I started many of my past projects. I've shared a story before from one of my early products where I spent 9 months building and launching a product only to realize that it was fatally flawed at the business model level. It had a viability constraint that I could have caught in minutes using the viability stress test. Now, you can certainly run these stress tests manually, as I've said before. That's how I did that and what I teach many other founders in my book and courses. But now, of course, there's LeanSpark. You can run the baseline stress test in under 2 minutes, and it's free to get started. I've shared a link in the description below and hope you check it out. Until next time, take care.
Hey guys, it's Chris, and today I want to talk to you about how to start implementing Claude Code in your company. This is the first tool ever where with such a low cost, you can 10x the productivity in everything you do, basically. You can write 10 times more scripts, you can launch 10 times more ads, you can contact 10 times more people with way more personalization. Whatever you're doing, if it's digital or even if it's non-digital, Claude Code is really one of the big life-changing moments, I think. I'm just going to show you a quick way how to get started with it and how to teach Claude Code to someone new who hasn't maybe used these kinds of tools before. What I typically do is I recommend everyone to get started with an IDE. What I use is a tool called Anti-Gravity, but you can also use something like VS Code, which is basically the same thing. And what this does is it's kind of like a hosting platform, but instead of using Claude, in a browser or somewhere, this one has access to all kinds of files. It's kind of like a Claude project, but it's way more flexible, and you can see how it interacts with files. You can easily files in there. Typically, we do is start, by setting it up, and then we start putting our SOPs in here, all kinds of tasks that we have. And for some new information, or if we're building out something new, we can also ask Anti-Gravity to, watch YouTube videos, read blogs, can get information. But we'll get into that in a moment. What it is basically like hosting platform. What we do is we connect the Claude Code application to it. So you can use the one that's built in by Google as well. But so far, I've been implementing for some reason it doesn't quite the same as actual Claude Code. It starts using Google's own tools for some which should really know things about it, and also that's been counting the tokens. And also so what I meant is that you install the Claude extension in there. Now, once you had, I recommend you use a framework that I learned from Xarive actually, which is called the Directive Orchestration and Execution Framework. And what this does is it gives your Claude a really nice operating framework for doing day-to-day business. Quick recap of it is that LMs by themselves tend to make mistakes because they're typically Python scripts or something. And so the agent becomes the orchestrator between the scripts and your directives, which are kind of like your SOPs. And I'll give you a file also that you can use for these. And that gives your Claude Code kind of the operating framework or the soul, so to say. Once you have it set up, once you have Claude Code in there, then it's time to start building your workspaces. And so a mistake I see people make in the beginning is they make one folder and they start putting everything in there. They'll have their copywriting in there. They'll have their sales work in there. They'll have their media buying ideas in there, and so on. And what this does is there's too much information and it starts clogging your LLM. It starts getting confused. Something I need to mention also is that inside Anti-Gravity, your Claude Code has something called memory. And this is something that it includes into every prompt that you do. And this is something that you can keep improving over and over again. So let's say it writes something that you don't like. And if you say, if you ask it to make changes to it, to the output, then you can also ask it to save that into the memory and the directives so it doesn't do the same mistake over again. But because the memory is limited, if you have too much stuff happening, the memory gets overloaded and it starts forgetting stuff. That's why instead of having everything, and when we ask it to do the same actions again, it remembers to do those things and it has those specific inputs and nothing else. In that and their specific winning ads, their specific frameworks as previously, and it just works as an ad uploader basically. And you don't have to do anything at all. You just drop the creatives in there and ask it to upload it. It can I took the same framework that I'm going to be giving you guys as well, but then I kind of went in there.
Hi, welcome to another video. So, Gemini CL. I just dropped two pretty big updates back to back, version 0.30 and version 0.31, and there's a lot of new stuff packed into both of them. We're talking new model support, an experimental browser agent, a brand new SDK, major policy engine upgrades, UI improvements, and more. So, let's get right into it. Now, let's start with version 0.30, which came out on February 25th. This one has 4 main areas of improvement. The biggest thing here is the introduction of the initial SDK package. This is quite great to see, because it basically opens up Gemini CLI for developers who want to build on top of it. The SDK lets you create dynamic system instructions, which means you can change how the AI behaves on the fly, depending on the context. It also introduces something called session context for SDK tool calls. So basically, your custom tools now have access to the session state, which makes them way more powerful. And on top of that, it adds support for custom skills. So, if you've been wanting to extend Gemini CLI with your own workflows and your own specific capabilities, this is how you can do it now. I think this is a really smart move by Google, because the more extensible these tools are, the more useful they become for real-world projects, which is pretty cool for sure. Then, they've also made some serious improvements to the policy engine. There's a new -- policy flag that lets you define your own user policies directly from the command line. So, instead of having to go into config files and manually set things up, you can just pass your policy inline when you run a command. They've also introduced strict seatbelt profiles, which basically give you tighter control over what the AI can and cannot do during a session. And the old -- allowed tools flag is now deprecated in favor of the new policy engine. So, if you've been using that old flag, you'll want to switch over to the policy system instead. It's more flexible and more powerful overall. I think the direction they're going with the policy engine is really good, because as these AI tools get more capable, You really do need better ways to control and restrict what they can access. On the UI side, they've added a generic searchable list for settings and extensions, which is a nice quality of life improvement. If you've ever had to dig through settings to find a specific option, you know how annoying that can be. Now you can just search for it. There are also new solarized themes, which is great if you're into that color scheme. They've added text wrapping for markdown tables, so your tables won't get cut off or look weird anymore. And there's also a clean UI toggle prototype, which seems like they're experimenting with a more minimal interface option. So, the interface is getting a lot more polished. And for the Vim users out there, they've improved Vim support to feel more complete. And they've also added support for Ctrl-Z terminal suspension. So, if you're someone who lives in the terminal and uses Vim for everything, this update should make your experience a lot smoother. That's great as well. Now, let's come to version 0.31, which came out just 2 days later on February 27th. And this one has some really exciting stuff. The headline feature here is support for the new Gemini 3.1 Pro Preview model. So, you can now use this latest model directly inside Gemini CLI, which is pretty amazing to be honest. If you've been following the Gemini model releases, you know these newer models have been getting significantly better at coding tasks, reasoning, and following complex instructions. Having immediate access to the preview model right in your terminal is a big deal because it means you don't have to wait for it to roll out everywhere else. You can start testing it right away in your actual development workflow. They've also introduced an experimental browser agent, which lets you interact with web pages directly from the CLI. This is kind of awesome because browser automation from a terminal tool is something a lot of people have been wanting for a while now. Think about it. You can now have your AI agent go to a web page, read it, interact with elements on it, and bring that information back into your terminal session. I believe this could be super useful for things like scraping documentation, testing web apps, or just quickly grabbing information from a page without leaving your terminal. Now, it is experimental, so take it with a grain of salt. But the fact that they're building this directly into the CLI is a really good sign. The policy engine got even more updates in this version. It now supports project-level policies, which means you can define different rules for different projects. So, if you have one project where you want the AI to have full access and another where you want it locked down, you can set that up at the project level. It also adds MCP server wildcards, so you can use wildcard patterns when configuring which MCP servers are allowed. And there's tool annotation matching, which gives you even more fine-grained control over what your tools can and can't do. So, between version 0.30 and 0.31, the policy engine has gotten a massive upgrade overall. And finally, there are web fetch improvements. They've added an experimental direct web fetch feature, which gives you a faster way to pull content from the web. They've also added rate limiting to help prevent DDoS risks, which is also good from a security standpoint, because you don't want your CLI tool accidentally hammering a server with too many requests. Overall, these two updates together are pretty solid. The SDK and custom skills support in 0.30 combined with the new model and browser agent in 0.31 make Gemini CLI a much more capable tool than it was just a week ago. I think Google is really pushing hard to make this a serious contender in the AI CLI space alongside tools like Claude Code and Aider. If you haven't tried Gemini CLI yet, now might be a good time to check it out because it's free to use. Overall, it's pretty cool. Anyway, share your thoughts below and subscribe to the channel. You can also donate via Super Thanks option or join the channel as well and get some perks. I'll see you in the next video. Bye.
A lot of businesses can really scale to tens of millions of dollars a day profitably with AI.
This is Alex, founder of Hicksfield, an AI company that hit 200 million annual recurring revenue in just 9 months, faster than Slack or Zoom. And what he told me about starting a business today completely blew my mind. And you can copy his strategy too.
Focus on bringing like the first dollar by day 30 of product development and maybe 1 million ARR by day 90.
That's a lot.
I just think it's the next industrial revolution. It's probably more powerful than the internet. For many, many young people, AI becomes social elevator.
For someone who still has fear, like this is moving so fast, I don't know how I can start. Can you give them one piece of advice?
First, I would start from
I have an amazing guest today. I am so excited to learn from you. Let's get very practical right away. You built Hicksfield and achieved $200 million in revenue in 9 months. Let's imagine, I don't want this to happen, but let's imagine a scenario when you have to start from scratch tomorrow and you have 90 days to launch a business idea. From what you've learned with your experience at Hicksfield, what would you do?
I think it all starts with maybe a team of 2, someone who is builder, who can go within 24 hours from idea to a product. And now it all becomes possible. There are so many databases, there are so many payment systems and so on, which simplify creation of MVP. And then someone, as I call it, go-to-market person, who has this natural empathy maybe or understanding of the sort of target distribution, whom they're selling to, and who can come up with interesting kind of new content formats, which can resonate with the target audience on social media. And I think this is a very different skill set from the like marketing roles of the previous decades.
And how many times should they be ready to iterate? How many ideas?
For example, for us last year, we were iterating every day. So it was 6 days a week. And every day we were putting new product release. As we were trying to find workflows and use cases which have high frequency and which matter for our target audience. And then once the technology gets there, it's important to develop sort of the workflow, which is easy enough, but gives enough configuration as well. This dilemma of the perfect interface is still not solved, frankly. So this is another reason why we embrace daily iteration. And on top of all of that, every month, the whole industry resets. They completely push the boundaries in terms of the capabilities. There are probably, let's say, 5 leading research labs, and each lab is pushing massive updates every quarter. So at some months, we have even 2 major updates. And typically it requires to substantially rebuild product goals. So it's time today because product builders like ourselves at Higgsfield, we just try to evolve the product so that it highlights the best possibilities of these models to our customers. But that's a context.
Yeah, it sounds like very challenging. I think you mentioned that last year was one of the hardest for you when a lot of things were not working. Can you talk to me about that one thing that actually worked?
In 2024, we really started labs, and things weren't working well because return on labs is relatively low. Things drastically changed for Hild when we started to collaborate with creatives. We just asked them very simple question. Did you see this video? This was a cool AI generated video. And they said, oh no, how is this possible? The cost. And we say, it actually costs maybe less than $100 for this. And they ask, did you actually try these models? What's your experience with AI? Obviously, everyone tried AI by then. Even by February last year, everyone tried AI, but everyone had some issues with that. Back then, we realized that the core limitation was around camera control. Like also of creative directors, they really want to control all the camera effects, camera angle, and so on. Back then, there was no system to achieve that. So that the initial version of Higgs.ai from these camera controls, which we implemented on engineering side based on the feedback from creatives.
So how many interviews did you have to conduct to come up with this feature?
This is a very good question, but it kind of puts me on a weak spot, frankly, because we inspect people, it's how it said the same thing. And we talk from Hollywood level movie directors to like regional producers of commercials. Everyone had the same feedback.
And how did you select those people? Were they customers already, or you just wanted to talk to people in the industry?
Actually, this was probably a challenge as we wanted to talk to people who we don't have a very close relationship to just get unfiltered opinion. But the feedback was very consistent. Everyone was missing these camera controls. So that's what we delivered March last year. Then in April, we delivered a library of visual effects. And then I think in June, industry completely changed. We saw the emergence of AI native marketing agencies. So essentially, those agencies, they completely go end to end with AI. And very often they try to bypass in. And I saw the uprise of TikTok and CapCut. CapCut became top 5 apps in the world. And it's unprecedented, as it's not a messenger, it's not a social media. And this was a strong signal for me that the needs of social media creators are simply unmet in the market. And the second reason why we had conviction, we constantly heard that creators feel a burnout from sort of feeling pressure to record multiple videos a day for socials with their own face. Mr. Beast, he spoke very openly about that. But I think that has been a primary challenge for the whole industry over the last 4 or 5 years. And then what was surprising to me is that advertisers have the same problem. Most of the advertisers talk about like maybe mid-market brands. They can be spending hundreds of millions of dollars on marketing, and they don't have any production team.
So you chose the right part of the market. This is what I'm hearing. So I feel like for every entrepreneur who's watching, when you see a big opportunity in the market, you also have to spot who's paying the most, not just go after each user, right?
Absolutely. We live in a very interesting era where all the powerful companies try to give AI to everyone. Literally Meta, XAI, Google, Microsoft, OpenAI, Anthropic, ByteDance, and many, many more. I think each of those companies want to give AI to all its customers, really. That's why startups have to have more nuanced view of the world and have to have more set of customers. And I think startups today are sort of incentivized to stay cash flow positive, build real business from day zero. This is what I see across Higgsfield and other top application AI companies. So I think this also creates a very interesting dynamic that the target audience should be maybe tens of millions of users who are willing to spend hopefully a couple $1,000s a month. So it is not for everyone, but the delivered value should be so strong. So the product should be so good so that it kind of sells itself.
I love that. And I love that you have a concrete number, $2,000.
Yeah, $2,000. I'm not sure, like with Higgsfield, for example, this is the core metric which we're tracking. Like how much of the value we believe we provide, which is more like through the user interviews, but also how much we charge users annually. So this is one key metric. And we are not chasing just monthly active users, for example, because the monthly active users number can be inflated through some viral effect. Monthly active user doesn't really speak to the frequency of the usage and the value delivered. So that's why for us, really daily active users and average ACV, average contract value, those two metrics are the most important ones.
One of the reasons I was so excited to sit down with Alex is that our team has actually been using Higgsfield for a while now. My producers and editors absolutely love that all the top AI models are in one place. Nana Banana, Cdance, Kling, Vio, Sora. And I love that they don't need 10 different subscriptions. And it's kind of incredible. Alex just told us that last year, they were shipping a new product release 6 days a week. And now everyone knows them. But they haven't slowed down. They keep launching new features. And one of the latest ones is SO 2.0. SO 2.0 is Higgsfield's own image model, and it's not like anything else out there. Most AI image generations, you type a prompt, you get something that looks fine. SO was built specifically for creative work, fashion, editorial, content. It actually understands aesthetics. You give it a reference photo, and it doesn't just copy it. It reads the lighting, the grain, the mood, the era, like a creative director would. There are 3 models. SO, that's the core model. You prompt, you get a beautiful image with real aesthetic awareness. SO reference, you upload a reference, and it generates new images that match the vibe, not just the composition. Same visual DNA, different shots.
Be very acquisitive and just trying to expand their product offering to multiple different verticals. Pretty much every week there is Claude for X launched and stocks go down. That definitely happens and that creates a lot of fear. And I would just say that the core insight for me personally was that most of these hot and hyped AI companies, they are actually cash flow positive. Like maybe it is a wrong mindset to go and raise venture capital today. I think there is plenty of pre-seed capital available today, but I'm not sure everyone needs like to raise Series A, B, C, D, and so on.
How much revenue did you have when you raised your first round?
For me, with Higgsfield AI, it was probably easier because I had a previous exit, and we basically raised $16 million without having any revenue, just with maybe having like million users for our mobile app. But this is not exactly the way how I would recommend to build today. I would recommend to focus on bringing like the first $1 by day 30 of product development and maybe 1 million ARR by day 90, and then decide if someone needs VC funding or doesn't need. I mean, a lot of businesses can really scale to tens of millions of dollars today profitably with AI. And for such businesses, there is no need to attract VC funding. I can give you a very simple example. So there are so many websites we just allow to make professional photo shoot, like for basically for passport. Many of them make tens of millions of dollars. None of them are going to be, none of them are going to be venture capital backed business.
Well, and you said something, $1 million by day 90.
ARR, meaning like 80K a month.
80K a month in 3 months, that's a lot. And so the playbook to achieve that is basically generate ads and launch them and test whether they're landing with your target audience?
Paid ads are very difficult today. I think a lot of distribution comes through organic social media and creator integrations. And just make sure that by day 30, there is monetization in place. And then there is a way to constantly grow to revenue to, let's say, 1 million ARR by day 90. Many successful companies scale very quickly today. Just different verticals have different capacity. In some verticals, the ceiling could be just 50 million. In other vertical, 1 billion. In other verticals, like 100 billion.
Any tips on landing first customers in the first 30 days?
Initially, at least last year, Twitter has been the social media where the distribution starts from. It starts from like small communities, then it goes to AI news pages on X, then from AI news pages on X, it goes to Instagram news pages, then from Instagram news pages to creators, then it goes to Telegram and like other social media. That's what we have seen with Higgsfield and with many other products as well, that they went through the same sort of journey of popularity and news through various social media, but it all originated on X. I think now it's being kind of changed. Today, a lot of hype, at least like a lot of companies, they sort of try to use X to boost their product. Sort of signal to noise ratio just drops. Twitter becomes less relevant, but still it's the main place for new AI products launch.
That's awesome. I'm still trying to crack the X strategy. I feel like if you add a word breaking or just in to whatever you're posting in the beginning, and it should be in caps lock, then it performs.
And then something should be like Claude cooked, RIP,
exactly.
like something like that.
Yeah, just wiped this out of the market.
Yes.
Yeah.